Hi, it's Kevin with Patient.dev, and in this tutorial, we're going to build a patient-facing app, an app that a patient could use to log into their own medical record to see which COVID vaccine they got. Now, you've probably already found the Google Doc. If you haven't, it's at patient.dev/COVIDvax, or you could look under code and go to COVID vaccination. I have a Google Doc where you could click and open up the Google Doc itself, but it's also embedded in this web page here. So for this video, we're going to make this patient-facing app in the Smart Health IT Sandbox. Now, you may be looking to do something within Epic or Cerner or Allscripts or an actual electronic health record. And I'll refer you to the other videos on the site for that. I wanted to do this in the Smart Health IT Sandbox to show you how to use a very nice developer sandbox that has a bunch of fake data in it that'll probably help you speed your efforts. So kind of at the end of the day, what we're going to build is a little web page that has a little gray box that says, you got the following COVID vaccines. Moderna COVID-19 vaccine on January 12, 2021. So this is going to be a very simple app that's going to allow a patient to log in as themselves into an electronic health record and get that information out using the Immunization Resource. So why are you using the Smart Health IT Sandbox? Well, it's good to know about the Smart Health IT project. I have a link to their webpage in the Google Doc. And Smart Health IT is out of Boston Children's, and they kind of originated this whole Smart FHIR journey that the United States seems to be on. If you read their history, they were launched in the New England Journal of Medicine article where they proposed a universal API to transform electronic health records into platforms for substitutable iPhone-like apps. So the idea was to create a framework such that you had this store of data, but you could have multiple apps plug into it. So they got a federal grant, and Smart on FHIR API was developed as an open, free, standards-based API. So that's very important. And that the documentation for it, which lives at hl7.org, but each electronic health record company also has their own documentation. This documentation is open. Anyone can look up how to use the FHIR server. It's free, and it's standards-based. The idea was innovators should be able to use it to write an app once and have it run anywhere in the healthcare system. Back in 2017, EHR vendors built support for Smart into their products like Epic and Cerner, and you can see those at FHIR.epic.com and FHIR.cerner.com. And then they say that, Apple uses Smart to give individuals access to their health records. So that is the health app. Google and Verily use it. Microsoft uses it. They mentioned 21st Century Cures Act, which kind of codified it into law, and then some other stuff that they do, such as the Sandbox, which we're going to use, as well as the App Gallery. So if you're making an app for other people, you might want to consider posting it on their free App Gallery so other people can find it as well. So that is smarthealthit.org. Specifically, what we're going to use is their launcher. So if you click on that link, you'll open up this Smart App Launcher, right? Basically, the Smart App Launcher lets you access a repository of data for different launch types. What are these launch types? Well, they're provider, patient, and backend services. So you could click here and do a provider EHR launch. That's like if you're developing an app that runs in an electronic health record for doctors and nurses. Let's say you have some kind of documentation engine or whatnot, you would use that launch type. Patient portal launch, so Smart apps can be embedded within the patient portal themselves. And say you were making an app for a big health system that wanted some kind of nutritional education based on ICD-10 codes inside of their patient portal. You could simulate that patient portal launch by clicking there. Provider standalone launch, so this would be for a provider app that is not inside of the electronic health record graphical user interface. So an example of this would be if you made an iPhone app that allowed a nurse to document something. That would be provider standalone launch. What we're going to use is the patient standalone launch. So this is an app like an iPhone app or any regular web app that allows a patient to just go to URL, log into a patient portal, and get their information out to that app in a standardized way. So this is distinct from the patient portal launch up here in that this is not work necessarily for a health system. This is, you are an independent app maker, you're a patient, you are a software engineer who has family who's trying to figure something out with their electronic health record. What you can do is make an app that launches itself and doesn't need any special embedding in a patient portal or whatnot. There's also a backend service that they support, so this is like a B2B, like a Pixis system talking to the electronic health record. That kind of B2B use case would be a backend service. And CDS hooks, which you can read more about, and maybe we'll do a video on sometime. So we're going to use patient standalone launch. We're going to use FHIR R4, so there are different flavors of FHIR. R4, R3, and R2. R4 is the one you should probably be using because it's backwards compatible, i.e. if you create something today, it'll work 5 years from now. They also have this ability to select patients, so you can click here, and it'll bring up a list of patients, and this is a very nice view. So say you were to want to be Miss Lantana Kohler, what you could do is click on her, and you could see all the different resources in FHIR. So these are the different things you can get out through the FHIR APIs for your app. And you could explore the conditions that are documented on her, the diagnostic reports like the lipid panel, the CBC, the different encounters, of note, immunizations, right, which is what we're interested in, pneumococcal and flu. Currently, no COVID. But the nice thing about Smart Health IT is it lets you browse this stuff. So as opposed to developing in a sandbox where you're not quite sure and, does this person have a flu shot, you could go and look up patients and look and see if they have flu shots. So you know that, hey, my code isn't, it's not that my code isn't working, it's just that this person doesn't have a COVID immunization documented on them. So what you could do is pick one of them. So if you picked one, what happens is it puts their unique identifier, like their patient ID there. So if we click there and hit OK, then you would get that patient ID there. You can skip patient login screen and skip authorization screen. Let's just do that for sake of this. And then at the bottom, what you end up doing is getting a FHIR server URL. And this is what we're going to use in a little bit. What I'm going to do is take this patient away. You'll notice that the FHIR URL changes. You can actually copy that if you wanted to. So here we are back on the Google Doc. And we went over to Smart App Launcher. Now we're going to actually look at some code. So you could create a account at REPL.it and fork my repo here. Now, I use REPL. I don't get any money or anything from them. When I first started making FHIR apps, it was a little confusing about how to set up my own little server type thing. And if you read some tutorials, they talk about using pages on GitHub, and that's kind of complicated. A nice thing about REPL is it has like 3 main panes, and it has some files. It has a code editor here. And then it spins up like a mini web server for you with your own URL so that you can serve out the web page that you're making. The way I've set this up for you is there's an index.html, which essentially has an anchor tag here. And it says, hey, I want you to open launch.html to this FHIR server, ISS, with this audience. And basically, if you change stuff around on here, you copy and paste this FHIR server URL here and here. And what that'll do is that'll open up the smart FHIR server to allow you to sign in. Now, one of the cool things about REPL, I mentioned it has a little mini web server. If you're wondering about how to save stuff, you don't have to save it. Like it says, which COVID vaccine did you get? Log in here, exclamation point ×4. You go here and you delete out those exclamation points. You go here and refresh the page. Those are gone. So you don't need to save anything in particular. On this page, you'll notice that I included some patients that I know are in the Sandbox and have COVID vaccines. What you could do is then copy and paste this when you're logging in. There's also a provider, so if you create an immunization, which is like a bonus feature, you need a provider identifier, and Dr. Olson happens to be this good. All right, so this is the index.html. So when you click here, it opens it to there. Now what you need to do, it's going to open launch.html. So what's in launch.html? Well, it has something called FHIR client v2, which is a little file that's in this. Essentially, FHIR client makes it really easy to do the authentication workflow to let a patient log in as themselves. It kind of abstracts away all the code exchanging that you need to do with OAuth 2 to have the patient log in. So suffice to say, most people just include this and use it. There's a little paragraph here that says, hello, I am the page launch.html, just so when you see it fly by, you'll see that index kind of redirects to launch.html. And then there's some really simple JavaScript. From FHIR client, there's a global called FHIR, and then OAuth2.authorize. For Smart Health IT, unlike Cerner and Epic, you can enter any client ID. There's nowhere to register as an app, like in Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, Athena. You need to tell them that, hey, I'm creating this app and it's going to use immunizations. Smart Health IT doesn't do that. It just lets you log in. But if you're interested in what and how to get one of these client IDs, I refer you to the Cerner and Epic videos. For scopes, I pre-populated these for you if you fork it up here. There's an online access scope. There's a profile, OpenID, FHIR user. What's important for us is launch/patient. This is going to allow the patient to launch it outside of the electronic health record. And patient star. So in Epic and Cerner, we saw that you would typically specify a scope like patient immunization.read. Smart Health IT lets you just do star, which means I want to be able to read and write everything as a patient, which is pretty cool. And then you need a redirect URI. So once OAuth 2 is done, where are you going to go? And what you could do is actually just copy this from your REPL and paste it here /app.html. Right. And then finally, there's an app.html, which is where we get the immunizations from. I'm going to pause there for a second and catch up on the Google doc. We forked the REPL. We opened launch.html and redirected it to our own server, which is there. And now what we can actually do is open a new window by clicking on that arrow. And we're going to launch it. We're going to log in, and we're going to want to log in as this patient. So Smart Health IT has these GUIDs instead of like a username. So, like in my patient portal, it'll be my Gmail address or something I'll use to log in. Instead of that Gmail address, it's this GUID, which you found in the app launcher. So let's do this right now. We're going to click open in a new tab. This is index.html. Which COVID vaccine did you get? Log in here. Hello, I'm launch.html, and now I am doing my OAuth. So I am going to log in as this user, and I can use any password that I want to, because it's all fake data, which is one of the nice things about using Smart's Sandbox. Click Login. It says, hey, patient, this application is requesting permissions to read your medical information and also to write your medical information. You want to approve or deny this. And this is very similar to Epic and Cerner, where it says, hey, this app wants to use your immunizations, and your demographics, and your labs, and your vitals. Do you want to do this, yes or no? So we're going to click Approve. What will happen is we will get our gray box, and it says you got the following vaccines: Moderna, COVID-19, on this day, and also on the same day, just a little bit later, you got another one, which would not be how you're supposed to get these COVID vaccines, but this is all Sandbox, right? So how did I do this? We'll switch back to app.html. So in app.html, we have FHIR client, which is going to do our OAuth 2, which was kind of that approve screen and all that. Include some jQuery, some underscore, and some day.js, just to make dates easier. I have a little CSS here that says there's a div called main. It's like, it has a light gray background, which we've seen. In the body, there's just a div called main, and then there's some JavaScript. I define a global saying my app is this object. FHIR OAuth 2 ready. So once OAuth 2 is done, then we're going to get something back from the OAuth 2 process, and we're going to cache that in myapp.smart. You're probably wondering what that looks like, and if you open up DevTools, you will see that there is myapp.smart. And this is what comes back from that FHIR client. It has information about the patient, so their ID, and that's what we logged in with. Also, if there's stuff about the encounter, but we didn't open this on a particular encounter, so that is null. Probably the most useful is state, which says, oh, this was the authorized URI, the client ID was this, the scopes were this that we requested. Probably the most important part is this token response, right? So this is the JWT access token. So you include this, so you do your OAuth 2, at the end of it you get this token, and you can use this token on behalf of the patient to query for their data, right? All right, so let's go back to the app. OAuth 2 is done. We cache it in myapp.smart, and then we do some requests. All right, and this is function do request. And FHIR client has some methods like fetch, its own fetch to get data from the FHIR server. I like using my own little network request fetch, so this is what I did here. So to get your immunizations, what you have to do is get myapp.smart, that state, that server URL. So this is the FHIR server, so could keep ourselves honest here and go here, and it's launched at Smart Health IT, which is what we launched it on, correct, in our launcher, I believe, right down here. Then we're going to add the immunization resource. And you're probably like, how did you know immunization resource? Well, you go to HL7 FHIR R4, and you could look at the different resources here. I believe it is here, and you can read more about it. And, you know, immunization is intended to cover the recording of current and historic administration of vaccines. So you could look around HL7. Slightly nicer is FHIR, the FHIR.epic or FHIR.cerner.com. If you go to Millennium for FHIR at R4 and medications, you will get immunization, and they have a little blurb about what the resource does. While we're here, it also tells you how to search for stuff, like you can search by patient or date, but you can't search by code. All right, so back to the code. What we're going to do is go to the FHIR server URL, the immunization resource, and we're going to say, we're going to search by patient. with the patient ID that we got back from the OAuth 2, so what the person signed in as. For this to work, you need to include some headers, an accept header of application/JSON plus FHIR. Please make sure you have plus FHIR, otherwise it doesn't work. And you need to give it the token, so authorization, bearer token, and this was the token response access token we looked at earlier. And that's all you actually need to get immunizations. Then, once you do this network request, this fetch, return the data, get the JSON, and log it. Right? So if we go back to the app itself, we will notice that there is something that says all immunizations, which console.log, all immunizations, is this object. And it is an array of 15 things. And let's just pick a random one here. And inside this array, each object has a resource, and then it has a vaccine code. And it happens to be that this one was for seasonal influenza, and it was administered in 2014, occurring state time. Happens to have this CVX code, so there's this system called hl7.org/FHIR/SID/CVX, and its code is 140. And you're probably like, what's a CVX code? And I'm happy you should ask, because if you look here, the CDC basically has a unique identifier for each vaccination. It's called the CVX code. What you could do is go to that URL, and if you go down a little bit, you'll see that CVX code 207 is the Moderna vaccine, which means I believe you got to wait an interval of 28 days to get your second dose. And 208 is the Pfizer vaccine, which I believe is a 21-day interval. So that's how you know which immunization that person got. It happens to be that CVX code 140 is a seasonal flu shot that is injectable. There are oral or by mouth flu vaccines, or at least there used to be, and preservative free. There is a entry that is vaccine code CVX 207, the Moderna one. So that's what we're getting over here. So how do we get that into the DOM? Well, we got this response here. And since you can't search by CVX code in Epic and Cerner, you might be able to do it in Smart Health IT Sandbox, but just in case you're trying to do this for real, what I set up here is a little filter and say that, that entry array, we're going to filter it. We're going to look for this system called CVX system. And if the code is 107 or 108, we're going to return that and create a filtered array of just these CVX codes. And then we log that, which you see right here. And there are two. And this is what we saw about, which is there's a vaccine code from Moderna and the occurrence date time here, which is over there. Let's see, which one was this? This is the one at 12. This one right here. If you're paying really close attention, I may have the wrong CVX code when I added this. Just FYI. It looks a little weird. All right, so how do we get that DOM element to show up? Well, you could do view or react or whatever you want to do. I'm just going to do some really straightforward string concatenation. So if there is nothing in that array called filtered, we cannot find that you got a COVID vaccination. Else, you got the following COVID vaccines. And then we're going to iterate through using _JS that filtered array and concatenate the vaccine coding and the occurrence date time. And then we're going to stick that in. And that is how we put this together. So what we were able to do is to create an app that a patient logged into using their patient portal username and password. They were able to approve that app accessing their medical information for immunizations, and then filter for the COVID vaccines that they got. Now, you may log into this and be like, hey, nothing's showing up. I believe Smart Health IT periodically purges like rights by people they don't know. So as a bonus feature, I have added this function called Create Immunization. That basically will create an immunization for today's date that you could post in there and then pull out. Well, I hope you learned something. You can feel free to explore the other videos at patient.dev or to reach out to me at kevin@patient.dev. Thanks.